So I want to introduce our panelists, and then we're going to call them up here. I'll kind of go through all their bios at once, and then we can hand it over to them. So first, we're going to have Mr. Keith Phillips, or Dr. Keith Phillips. Keith Phillips is Assistant Vice President and Senior Economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, San Antonio branch. Sorry, Keith. You can stay seated. Okay, sorry, my bad. Keith joined the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas in 1984 and transferred to the San Antonio branch in 1996. His areas of concentration include regional economics and economic forecasting. The publication Research Papers in Economics ranks Keith in the top 5% of economists across the world in terms of the number of distinct publications. Over the past 16 years, he has been the most accurate forecaster for Texas job growth in the Western Blue Chip economic forecast. Phillips teaches courses in managerial economics and quantitative analysis in the executive MBA program at UTSA. He obtained his PhD in economics from Southern Methodist University and holds a BA and MA in economics and a Bachelor of Journalism degree in news and editorial from the University of Missouri at Columbia. Following him will be Taylor Rhodes. Taylor is CEO of Rackspace, the world's leading provider of expertise and support for cloud computing based here in San Antonio. Taylor joined Rackspace in 2007 and has been an integral part of the leadership team that grew that company to 6,100 employees and $2 billion in annual revenue. Rackspace today serves business customers in 120 countries, including a majority of the global enterprises in the Fortune 100. Under Taylor's leadership, Rackspace recently went private in an acquisition led by Apollo Global Management. Taylor's a former U.S. Marine Corps infantry officer and holds an MBA degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I didn't ask if he couldn't get into Texas, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later. Following Taylor, we'll have Alan Dreeben. Alan is a partner and director of Republic National Distributing Company, one of the nation's leading wholesale beverage alcohol distributors specializing in wine and spirits. He was the 2014 to 15 chairman of the Wine and Spirit Wholesalers of America. That must be a really good conference to go to. And he also serves on the board of directors of Camber Energy and is an advisory director for Cullen/Frost Bank. Dreeben is a current member and former chair of the McCombs School of Business Advisory Council and MSB Foundation trustee, a member of the University of Texas at Austin Development Board, and executive committee chairman of the UT System Chancellor's Council. It's not in my official list, but also a member of our Hall of Fame. He received a BBA from the University of Texas at Austin, an executive MBA from Harvard University, couldn't get into Texas for the MBA, and holds an honorary doctorate from Texas State University. Let me invite our panelists to make their way to the stage. As they make their way, please join me in a round of applause. Welcome them here. I'm going to hand it over to Keith. You have some cards on your table to ask questions, so as they're speaking, if you would, think of questions you might want to hear from them. And now that we have Red on the stage, we can also ask Red questions about the economy or anything else. So please think about your questions, and we'll have not only those cards submitted, but also some microphones going around to be able to ask as well. So let me turn it over to Keith.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure to be here in this event. As you might notice, I don't have an orange tie on. I did not graduate from the University of Texas. But by the grace of God, my son will eventually. He's officially a junior at UT in computer science. And according to the simple math they taught me at the University of Missouri, he should be out by now and off my payroll. So apparently there's more things to do in Austin than attend class, but eventually he will graduate, I'm sure, and then I will hold UT dear in my heart. So I think I'm supposed to have some slides. Do I? Oh, great. So today I'm going to look at the Texas economy and a little bit on San Antonio, since most of you, I think, are from San Antonio. But just briefly, the Texas economy, as you know, was hit quite hard by a very sharp decline in energy prices over the last 2 years. And I ran into several different sources of analysis from people mostly outside the state that suggested that Texas would certainly go into recession. Particularly at the first quarter last year, when energy prices fell again, there was a lot of speculation that Texas could not withstand this type of decline in the energy sector. I did not agree with that. And fortunately, that has come to pass, at least the data we have now, that the Texas economy continued to grow despite the decline in energy prices and the energy sector itself. So as we head into 2017, there's a little more optimism from the energy sector. We have a survey, and producers are much more optimistic about the outlook for oil, although oil prices aren't expected to shoot up anytime soon. The outlook seems to be improved, and overall our contacts across Texas, as well as my forecasting model, suggests that the Texas economy will grow faster this year than it has in the past 2 years, and hence my title, Shifting into Second Gear. Now, second gear is a term I use for the state as a whole. In San Antonio, we really haven't been in first gear. We've been moving at quite a good clip despite the declines in the energy sector. And that's similar for the areas along the I-35 corridor. So if you want to take a nap, that's basically what I'm going to tell you, except I'm going to use a lot of data and slides to make that point. So in the 5 years prior to 2015, Texas economy was one of the fastest growing states in the nation. We, as you know, had a stimulus from the energy sector going on, but we had a lot of other things going on also, including the fact that our construction sector had a more of a typical rebound. We didn't get into the problems that a lot of the sand states did with the housing overbuilding and the price increases in housing. And so we didn't see the crash and the problem in mortgages that a lot of other states did. So our construction sector was in much better shape. And we are a big exporting state. Even though we're about average in terms of manufacturing, we're the top exporting state in the nation and in the top 5 in terms of the share of jobs tied to exports. And we had a very strong expansion in exports going along. So in the years prior to the decline in oil prices, Texas was one of the fastest growing states in the nation. And of course, over the last 2 years, oil prices fell sharply. That hurt the oil and gas sector, also the manufacturing sector that produces a lot of equipment for the oil and gas sector. And the manufacturing sector was also hit by a very strong dollar. Despite these challenges, Texas remained stronger than the other energy states in the nation. While energy and manufacturing weakened sharply, the service sectors in the state continue to grow, and regionally the I-35 corridor of Dallas and Austin and San Antonio seem to be very little impacted by the decline in the energy sector. And this is very different from the 1980s, if you remember the 80s when we had oil price declines, and it was followed by a big downturn in the construction sector, which was followed by a big downturn in the financial sector. Neither the construction sector or the financial sector have been hit. Both of those sectors remain in very good shape. So last year, jobs grew in Texas at about 1.4%, slightly stronger than the previous year, 1.3%. Texas long-term average is about 2%, so we were below average and below the national average, which is unusual for Texas, but still positive and pretty strong considering the decline in the energy sector. This year, I think growth will pick up to about 2%, close to our long-term average, and we'll noticeably start to gather steam, and this will be the first time in 3 years. Once again, we return to our normal kind of performance of growing faster than the national average. So this is just a chart of, I went back to 2014. This is a ranking of job growth across the states. We use job growth. Nationally, if you rely on one indicator, it's usually gross domestic product. That is not a very timely indicator for states, so we rely on job growth. And you can see job growth here. The black bars here are energy states. And you can see that in 2014, before the big decline in energy prices, Texas was the 4th fastest growing state in the nation. But, you know, energy seemed to play not that big a role overall, because quite a few of the energy states were below the national average in terms of job growth. North Dakota, which was experiencing a fracking boom, was the second fastest growing state. I like to remind people, if you can actually see any of those things, ND is not Notre Dame. We don't want that in front of Texas. So that's North Dakota. It was the second fastest growing state. And then if you go one more year with the oil price decline, you can see all the energy states in the big decline. So North Dakota went from the second fastest growing state to the biggest declining state in terms of job losses in the nation. But Texas moved to below the national average, but very different from the other states. And I think this chart is very revealing in the sense that Texas is an energy state, but it has a lot more going on than just energy, or else it would be lumped down there with the rest of the energy states. If you look at last year, Texas grew much more closer to the national average. U.S. was at 1.5 and we're at 1.4. And you can see once again we continue to outperform other energy states across the nation. So if you look at that was Texas job growth at a certain point in time relative to other states. This is Texas job growth relative to the national average since 1990. And Texas here is the blue or purple bars. And you can see one of the first things you notice is Texas usually does grow faster than the national average. We're a Sun Belt state. We have faster job growth. This long-term growth faster than the national average has nothing to do with the energy sector. Prior to the fracking boom, the energy sector was on a long-term decline in Texas. The reason why Texas does well in the long term is because we have a good business environment. You know, what states grow faster basically relies on two questions: where do people want to live, and where can companies maximize profits? And Texas has been one of those states because we have a low cost of living, low cost of doing business. And so this has allowed Texas in general to perform better than the national average, and we're returning to that pace of growth, I think, this year after this energy price shock over the last 2 years. So if you look across metro areas in the state, you can see that much of the weakness in the state occurred in the Houston economy. Houston went from growth in excess of 4% in 2014 to close to 0% over the last 2 years. Houston has 25% of all jobs in the state. If Houston were a state, it'd be 13th largest. Is that, Chris? Is that right? What? 18th largest state, between Missouri and Tennessee. So Houston is a big place. And so how the oil and gas sector, how it impacted the state was basically through Houston. But Houston did amazingly well. If you compare it to what happened in the 80s when oil prices collapsed, and Houston has benefited from a big gain in petrochemicals and diversification in areas such as healthcare. So Houston maintained basically flatness, whereas in the past it would have declined. In the early 80s, a similar oil price shock resulted in a 7% decline in employment in Houston. So if you look at this relative to past, Houston being a global center of energy, Houston's done pretty well. But if you look at the other areas like Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, those places just continue to grow over the past 2 years. Now, Austin slowed a little bit last year. We got this, if you went to my speech about 3 weeks ago, this data looks a little bit different. We got third quarter data revisions in, and now San Antonio is actually, for last year, is the fastest growing large MSA in the state. Actually grew faster than Dallas. And Austin's growing about 2.3%. One of the biggest challenges in Austin is just finding workers. Despite the great university producing workers there, they still have a lot of business activity going on and a shortage of workers. So the decline in energy affected Corpus Christi the most out of these jobs and And Corpus is on here because we have directors from Corpus. You can see that the growth and then decline in the Eagle Ford had a bigger impact on Corpus Christi than it did San Antonio. San Antonio is not a historically oil and gas town. We got some jobs from that, but not a big share of our economy. If you look at the unemployment rate, Texas, despite the slowdown over the last several years, the unemployment rate in Texas remained below the national average, although in the last half of last year we saw some rises, and we ended the year just about the same rate. We're at 4.6, the U.S. was 4.7. So overall conditions in the Texas economy, despite the slowdown, remain good with actually continued tight labor markets throughout the state. So if you look at across sectors of the Texas economy, you can see, like I said before, most of the weakness occurred in manufacturing and mining, with service sector jobs continuing to grow. The construction sector, like I said, in the 80s, a big problem with the state was when energy fell, the construction sector also fell. We didn't see that this time. We came into the oil and gas price decline with very tight markets in construction, and we've seen continued growth. This top line is total contract values. You can see they've been higher than before the Great Recession. And the blue line is residential, and it's been at very strong pace, although it's leveled out somewhat over the last year or so. Overall, the construction markets remain in good shape, with some question marks, some growth in vacancy rates in Houston. The other markets remain in very good shape. This is just a thing about office markets. There has been some rise in vacancy rates, but mostly that's centered in Houston. Historically, when it's gotten this high, we've seen some slowdown in office and bank contract values, but we've seen already that slowdown in Houston, but I expect some slowing this year of office building, but the markets once again remain in good shape. If you look at our manufacturing sector, production outlook and new orders, we saw a significant improvement at the end of the year. Many of our survey contacts in manufacturing sounded similar to Red here, that things had improved, that they were looking forward to less regulation and more growth as we enter the new year. So the company outlook for our manufacturing sector is the highest it's been in many years. One challenge to our manufacturers, our manufacturing has improved, and I think a lot of that has to do with some optimism, plus also the more optimism in oil and gas. But the dollar remains very strong, and when you're exporting, a strong dollar means your goods are more expensive, and it's a challenge for our manufacturers. So if the dollar remains as strong as it is or gets stronger, that will be a continued headwind for manufacturers in the state. If you look at the energy sector, the drilling rig count has been increasing since mid-2016. It still remains very low by historical standards, but it's gradually improving. And oil prices, you know, there's been some optimism with less regulation, but also the OPEC thing, although producers are always skeptical that that will hold up. But the big thing is that oil prices have remained above $40 for a persistent amount of time. And that's actually unusual stability in the oil price. And that's created more optimism from our energy producers. Our energy survey, this is once again, you can see the company outlook, which is on the far right there. Between the third and fourth quarter, we saw a surge in the company outlook for our energy producers. This is the largest energy survey done in the United States, by the way. Okay, so San Antonio, real briefly, was very strong last year. I'd spent some time 3 weeks ago trying to explain why San Antonio weakened so much. I don't have to do that anymore because the data got revised in the third quarter. Now the data actually show that we grew 3.7% last year after 2.8% the previous year. So very little impact of the energy decline in San Antonio. Federal government is a big source of jobs here. As you know, we do a lot of stuff for the military, and it's been growing at a good pace. Healthcare is very important to San Antonio. It's continued to grow strongly. Construction has weakened a little bit, but still remains very healthy. Overall, I expect San Antonio to grow somewhere between 2.5% to 3.5% this year. So another good year for San Antonio in 2017. So if you look across all the metros in the state and you say, what's the biggest factor explaining the differential in growth? It's basically the size of the energy sector. That's not every year. This is just these past 2 years, given the big shocks to the energy sector and big decline. The correlation there is minus 0.70. The highest, of course, it could be is minus 1. And the previous year is minus 0.9. So it really is a big factor in explaining why things are doing. In San Antonio, you can see here, is the fastest growing last year and had less than 1% of its jobs in the mining sector. Dallas was second fastest and it has 0.4% of jobs. If you go down to the bottom, you see Midland and Odessa, obviously the weakest, and they 22% of jobs in Midland are in oil and gas. But you also see Houston down there. So oil and gas has been a big factor going forward. I think if energy prices remain stable, it won't be as big of a factor. It'll slowly fade away. If you look at kind of what's happening, I have this leading index for Texas, and over the last 3 months of the year last year, it was up with most of the indicators positive. The biggest negative was, again, the strength of the dollar, putting headwinds on the manufacturers in the state. So it suggests growth this year around 2%. One of the biggest sources of uncertainty is oil prices. If you look at the futures market, it suggests we'll end the year at, what does it say, $56 a barrel. But if you use a 95% confidence band, it's $34 to $90. So one of the things we know for sure is we don't know what's going to happen to oil prices. And thus, I always have a way out. If my forecast doesn't work out, I can blame it on oil prices. So in summary, in the past 2 years, the Texas economy has weakened, but held up quite well given the shocks to the energy sector. It did much, much better than the 80s under similar conditions and better than other energy states in the nation. We saw improvement in the state's economy in the second half of last year, so we have momentum coming into this year. We see more optimism by our business contacts about growth this year, and certainly stability in oil prices have led to increased optimism in the energy sector. There's a lot of uncertainty with the new administration, particularly in trade impacts. Texas is once again one of the biggest exporters in the nation, and two of the biggest risks to the forecast are the strength of the dollar and any kind of changes in the trade deals that might affect our exports, and then of course changes in oil prices. So that's my outlook. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning. My name is Taylor Rhodes, and I'm with a little company here in town called Rackspace. Dean, thanks for having an imposter, a non-UT grad. You know, as you said in your opening remarks, I am a Marine, and more so a Marine infantry guy or a grunt, so they didn't learn me to read so good. That turned out to be a challenge in selecting UT as a program, so I went to Carolina where shoes and literacy are optional. So I appreciate you lowering the bar for me today. So we're going to talk a little bit about what the heck is happening in terms of technology and automation and the perception that technology is taking a lot of jobs away. Is that good for the economy, bad for the economy? How do we think about that as the San Antonio-Austin corridor? What are our opportunities to be on the winning side of that equation versus the losing side? And I think we are sitting here today after 8 or 9 hard years of the Great Recession. We're sitting here today with lots of tension and uncertainty, the 99% and the 1%. The divide between the haves and the have-nots. I'm delighted to see the stats for UT grads, placement and salaries, but that's not universally true. If you talk to a lot of young people today coming out of college, they're worried about where they're going to get a job. They're worried about the student debt load they have. They're worried about whether things they studied in school are still relevant, or is a robot going to take their job? And so when you think about this uncertainty, this gets back to this age-old fear. Is my business, if I'm a small business owner, is my business about to be disrupted? Is some smart kid in a garage with a credit card about to invent my business in a new way in a highly digitized fashion, be able to scale faster? This is a real fear, and we've seen a lot of dislocation, a lot of disruption in the economy over the last couple of years. In fact, when I was at Starbucks just the other day, I walked in and I saw my favorite local barista, saw a few of my neighbors, and they said, "Hey, you haven't been here for a couple weeks." And I kind of sheepishly said, "Well, my wife got me a fancy coffee maker for Christmas. I took the hint. She doesn't think I should spend $5 with you 365 days a year. I can get coffee at home." But I said, I'm back. I'm back because I miss y'all. I miss the experience. And he said, "You know what? Howard Schwartz, who's the CEO of Starbucks, that's his main message to us right now." He said, "We have to continue to make this experience great, or a robot is going to take our jobs." And I kind of looked at him a little bit funny, and I thought a robot surely would never replace this experience, right? But then I went to work and I saw the USA Today. And USA Today actually said, in Silicon Valley this past week, the world's first robotic barista was launched at a company called Cafe X. Of course, it has an X in it because it was invented by a millennial, all right? So you have to have X in the name. That's a rule you have to follow, all right? This is real, okay? So this white, faceless, nameless robot is an affront to a lot of us. It's an affront. It says, how could I ever possibly replace this experience? How could I possibly replace the value of me, a human, with a robotic arm that can fix 50 cafe lattes in a minute? It's happening around us. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Disruption has always happened. It's not new. We often get asked about cloud computing. Well, technology has been evolving ever since it was invented. In fact, the first dislocation this country went through, or the world went through, pre this country, was in the 1700s when mechanized agricultural tools started to displace the hand. And so ever since time began, this dislocation, this disruption, this advancement of technology has been forcing humans to think about what they're going to do next. And so as we sit here today and we wonder, is this a good thing for the economy? Is it a bad thing for the economy? The first thing we know is it's not a new thing for the economy. The economy will continue to evolve. But I'd like to share some thoughts with you today about what we see happening, what you as business leaders need to think about. How do you not get disrupted? How do you take advantage of digital business models? How do you think about what your employees should be doing to add value? How can technology make them more insightful, more relevant? How can it take costs out of your business model so you have more to invest in what really matters? So let's think about those things. First of all, what the heck is cloud computing? It's an overused term, but I'll define it for you today in the simplest way I can. First of all, the old way of doing computing, and some of you may still have things that look like this in your computer room in your offices. The old way, buy some expensive hardware, buy some proprietary software, hire somebody to integrate it all and maintain it and manage it. And oh, by the way, when you got through all of that, it was already obsolete, but you're stuck to it. It was a lock-in model that was very, very capital intensive and time intensive, and it threw up a lot of barriers to entry to new people who wanted to start new businesses, had great ideas, didn't have the capital, or to R&D and expansion in current businesses because you had to wait, put your business case in, get your CIO to approve it. The gear's going to be provisioned 3 months later. You keep it forever, you're stuck with the cost. So the old way threw up a lot of barriers. And the new way is simply to consume out of shared pools of computing, storage, and networking in the cloud. The cloud simply means you don't run it. It's running in a Rackspace data center, an Amazon data center, a Microsoft data center, and you're simply tapping into that scale of capital and OpEx that somebody else has built for you and leveraging what you need and paying as you go. So an easy way to think about this is the old power grid, right? This is an image of companies that built their own power plants because there wasn't a great distribution model that allowed them to consume off of the grid. Well, we all know we don't do that anymore. Today, you buy power from CPS. You don't think a whole lot about it. It just works. You didn't have to create the capital, do the construction, string the lines. You just consume it, and it works for you. And you don't think about anything when you flip this light switch, do you? You walk in a room, you turn the lights on. When you leave, you turn them off. You get a bill at the end of the month. You're not sitting here thinking about any of the complexity that is abstracted away by this simple instrument called a light switch, because we've become used to this. Well, our goal at Rackspace, the goal at Amazon, the goal at Microsoft, is to make access to technology as simple for you as business people as flipping the switch, abstracting away the complexity, letting you consume what you need, and paying only for what you use and not for stranded capacity. And that's powerful. So many of you might be sitting here thinking, okay, great, I'm not in tech. I don't sell technology, so why does this matter? Well, it matters. I bet you the taxi industry didn't believe it was in the technology business either, and look what happened. Little audience participation. How many of you have used Uber or Lyft? Almost everybody. Okay, now, Second question, how many of you are ever eager to get back in a yellow cab again? Is anybody? It's a much better experience. And guess what? It's 100% enabled by a digital business model running in the cloud. It would not have been possible, cost-wise, distribution-wise, et cetera, without this thing called cloud computing. And it's massively disruptive. You see it in industries all around you. You know, the question we get all the time, well, okay, so overall, is this net good or bad for jobs? Will there be more jobs in the future, or will there be fewer jobs in the future? And the answer is yes. There will be fewer of certain types of jobs, and there will be more of other types that are potentially higher value. All this stuff doesn't happen by magic. There is no fairy that walks around and makes it happen. We have to employ 6,000 people at Rackspace in order to make this simple for our customers, in order for Brad Belden's roofing company, thank you for being a customer, Brad, to be able to do what he does best. Brad shouldn't be building computing. Brad should be consuming that as a service and being the best roofer in his business. But when we think about what it takes to create this outcome, you think about how we've had to disrupt ourselves over time. And all of you have to keep disrupting yourselves as well, or someone else will do it for you. Here's an example. When I joined Rackspace 10 years ago, we had a significant number of employees who sat on the loading docks at our data centers waiting for a pallet of servers to arrive from Michael Dell. They'd break that pallet open, they'd take the top off the server box, they'd pull out all the RAM sticks, they'd put them in inventory, the customer would order it, they'd take it back out, they'd rebuild it, they'd put it in a rack, they'd do what we call kick it, and they'd roll it out to the data center floor, plug it in, wait for the network to discover it. We had lots of people doing that job. That was high value add at the time. Because at the time, finding people who knew how to build and scale and keep Linux-based web applications up and running was high value. Today, everything arrives in a wheeled cart with 15 to 20 servers in it. We push it in the data center, we plug it in, the network discovers it, and there's nobody doing that work anymore. So what happened to those jobs? What happened to the jobs that we used to have at Rackspace when we had a security vulnerability and it took 150 people scrambling, trying to fix it for 7 days in a row and being massively disruptive to our customers? Well, today, some of our engineers have written code that says we push a button and all of that work happens. So this constant disruption and moving higher in the value chain is something we're all familiar with, and yet around us we keep seeing traditional business models being taken by surprise. So do those jobs go away? Well, sometimes they do. Some of those rackers are not at Rackspace anymore because they didn't have the right skills and the right capabilities. Some of them have been retrained. Some of them have been hired in so that we can actually position ourselves in a higher value place in the food chain. And in the early days of cloud, it wasn't used by every company. As with any inflection in business, it's usually adopted by people who have foresight, who like to play with new things. And these are some of our companies that we host here in San Antonio that started out playing with the cloud early. Who thinks Yeti is actually a cooler company? Turns out they're not. They're actually an e-commerce company that is an amazing job marketing and finding customers online. I don't think any of you really need a cooler that can withstand a grizzly attack. I just don't think you do. I think that's an awesome commercial, and I love it. But Yeti turns out to be a born-in-the-cloud technology-based platform that happens to sell coolers and other products related to it. Now, audience participation again. How many of you use Tinder? I'm just kidding. Don't raise your hands. Okay, let's keep that one private. If you don't know what Tinder is, see me after. But if you're not a technology company today, no matter what industry you're in, you are in trouble. I'm sorry to tell you that. Every single business today, no matter what industry they're in, is a tech company. You heard Jay talk about the fact that his business graduates who have a combination of finance and technology do the best. No matter what business you're in today, you better be a technology company. Let me tell you a quick story about Domino's. One of our largest customers, we serve them in the US, we serve them in Europe and Asia, and they don't go by Domino's Pizza anymore, do they? Have you noticed that? They shed the pizza down out of their name. They just go by Domino's. Domino's, it turns out, is no longer a pizza company. Domino's is a data and analytics company. About 6 years ago, they made some big moves. They made some hires. They invested in data and analytics, and they went on a mission to discover how they could find out what you want at the right time when you're willing to pay peak price for it. And they found out that that's not just pizza. They were able to use data and analytics to find out what other products you would buy from them. And it turns out, if you look at their stock price, they have turned themselves from a pizza company into a technology company with the valuations to boot. This is a lesson for all of us. No matter what business you're in, you better be in technology because it is creating digitized business models that are faster, more agile, more nimble. So this is not an evenly distributed game of winners and losers. Look at this chart. This is the market cap for IBM in March of 2012 to today. And it's the market cap of Cisco from the same time period. This is a massive loss in market valuation. These are the kings of what Lanham Napier, our previous CEO, used to call the technology industrial complex. These were the kings of the lock-in model. You buy their stuff, you can never get out. Well, guess what? Someone found a way to free you. Look at the market cap transfer that's happened to probably the two reference brands in SaaS and cloud, Amazon and Salesforce. Can you imagine that today Amazon has a higher market cap by more than 2 times than the mighty IBM? And if you pay attention, it's actually all driven not from their e-commerce business, but from their cloud computing business. This is an amazing shift that's happened in a short 8 to 10 year period of time. And it turns out that we're only really just beginning. There's over $500 billion of old stuff running in corporate data centers that are just starting to move into this cloud. So the disruption and transfer of wealth will continue. So, we're not as recession-proof as Alan's business model, right? I mean, how many of y'all like a drink when times are hard? Yeah? Okay. How many of you like a drink when times are good? There you go.
I took a line out of my speech.
Alan, I'm sorry about that. I apologize. Yeah. I do want to go to one of Alan's conferences, though. I'm pretty sure we know what they do. We're not recession-proof, but it is interesting to see what happens in these cycles of boom and bust that we go through in the economy. In 2008, we thought the world was about to end. We went public on August 8th of 2008, approximately 40 days before Lehman Brothers happened, right? We were the only tech IPO. We always used to say it's better to be lucky than good, okay? But the market seized up. Our small business customers are going out of business. Our growth rate fell. Our churn rates went up. And we thought, we actually drew our revolver down from the bank. I can't remember who our banker was at the time, but they were pretty pissed at us, okay? So we thought the world was ending. But what happened in global financial crisis is that companies said, I have to shed cost. Part of the way I'm going to shed costs is I'm going to get out of my data center. I'm going to fire my technical people. I'm going to buy this as a service. And what really happened is that global financial crisis raised risk tolerances. When you're in pain, you do things differently. And it threw fuel on this new thing called cloud. Cloud was a nascent model. It was virtualization. But everyone said, this is going to be cheaper. I can save 40% over what I was doing before. I'm going to try cloud. So as we saw this massive shock hit the economy, it actually created the next round of creative destruction. Joseph Schumpeter, we all learned in business school. And what happened out of that is companies started to invest more and more in technology to enable their businesses, which meant they hired back employees more slowly. So what we've seen through the Great Recession is a slower rebound in employment versus GDP. And a lot of that is technology enabled. So is that a bad thing or a good thing? Well, overall, it will be a great thing if we learn how to make this transformation just like we did moving off of farms into cities, et cetera. But it's a reality. In fact, as technology becomes more powerful, as the unit of power and value you get from tech comes at a lower and lower cost, following Moore's law, companies are investing in more tech. Today, your average company, according to RightScale, uses 6 different clouds, right? I'm using private clouds, public clouds, some I run, some somebody else runs. So this investment in technology enablement is going to continue because tech and digital business models just do things faster, better than humans can do them. So how do you use technology to put humans in the right place where they can create value and insight from technology? The great news for us at Rackspace, for San Antonio and Austin, is that when you ask a CIO or a CEO what their #1 concern is on keeping up with this race, it's lack of expertise. We are not producing enough engineers in this country or commercial people who understand technology and digital business models to keep up with the demand. And that is a great thing for us. It's wonderful because that's what we do. We provide expertise at scale so that people can buy it as a service. It can be a great thing for San Antonio, for Texas as a whole, but we need to think it through. We need to think about how we end up on the winning side of this equation by becoming a technology ecosystem here in San Antonio, by watching what Austin has done successfully, by really being deliberate about how to win. So what does it take? What are the ingredients of a successful tech ecosystem? Well, the first thing is you better have a vibrant downtown where these young technology-oriented professionals want to work and live. We better be an attractive spot when they visit town. This is something that we're making progress on. We've got more work to do. We need pools of capital. We need angel and venture level investing that help these entrepreneurs get out of the garage, get into the market. We're starting to see pools of capital form here in San Antonio as well. Co-working spaces and incubators create enormous innovative acceleration. This is an image of geekdom downtown. When smart people get together and they have others around them to bounce ideas off of, to push and compete against, to find mentors, to be incubated, magic things happen. We need a community of technology-oriented businesses who grow up in San Antonio and choose to stay. And we need more who will come here and choose San Antonio as their home. Ultimately, San Antonio needs to think about the things that we need to do to become competitive with San Francisco, Seattle, New York, Boston. Sounds like people are way ahead of us, but after that list, it drops off pretty fast. So it's really a wide open playing field. We have an enormous opportunity here, and we're proud to be a part of it. And we're off to a decent start. We've seen a lot of activity in San Antonio in the last 10 years. This is an image of some of the companies here in town, some who have fallen off the Rackspace oak tree and planted their own acorns and are starting to grow, some other hosters here in town, like Pier 1 and Hostway. You've got UTSA with the Open Cloud Academy and lots of good tech innovation programs happening there. You've got Tech Block, a major advocacy group formed to help us think and work with the civic leaders on how we become a great technology destination. So we're off to a good start. We have more to do. This is a snapshot of the Airbnb home site. Who's used Airbnb before? Anyone? Probably less than Uber. Okay, think about this. 5 years ago, if you went on a trip, did you ever even question that you would stay in a hotel when you went on a trip? Did you ever think you'd want to stay in somebody else's house? This is crazy innovation. Who would know that there's a market out there to connect excess supply of homes with people who are interested in renting those homes and creating income for the owner? The magic of digital business models. If you're thinking about this and you're saying, you know what, it just doesn't apply to me. It does. And you have an enormous opportunity to digitize your business model. Think of every step in that value chain. Where can technology position you better? It's exciting, but you better do it. So we've all seen this analogy. I don't think we respond to automation by trying to harness back factory jobs that are just uneconomic for us in this country and for the employers who try to keep jobs here. We need to embrace the fact that our job is to create education and training to do what we've always done in this nation, to move skill sets up into the higher value creation zone. We've got all the capital in the world. We've got the market structure to do it. We need to embrace it and not lean back. I'd much rather be Netflix than Blockbuster. Blockbuster, I used to love to go to that store, right? You used to get to browse all the shelves, buy some popcorn, take home a big clunky VHS tape. Some of you in the room, I met a young UT grad over there, you don't even know what Blockbuster is, do you? Right? She's like, what the heck is Blockbuster? I don't know. It's like my two teenage daughters. My two teenage daughters are competing for a new Olympic sport, by the way. It is called snaps per minute. I'm pretty sure SPM will be an Olympic metric in 2020, right? You know what I'm saying? Okay, don't be Blockbuster, be Netflix. At Rackspace, we've had to go through a lot of pain. We were the disruptors in the first 15 years of our being. We found a way to disrupt the heck out of crappy service providers like telcos, no offense if you're in the room, CIOs who were slow moving and didn't deliver great value to their customers, and we were the disruptors. We were early into cloud. And then all of a sudden, the world's biggest bookseller came along and decided to take our profit pools and do things in a better and new and innovative way. And that big oak tree on the left side of this is an amazing $2 billion business. But guess what? We better have the courage to go cannibalize ourselves, to go create change, to plant new high-growth businesses for our future. And that's what we're doing. And it's hard. Have any of y'all ever felt caught in the innovator's dilemma, where what makes you money today actually is what holds you back for tomorrow? It happens, right? So we've planted new businesses, leveraging the power of the hyperscale cloud providers as the underpinning of our model so that we can add value on top and do what we've always done. Here's a picture of our big old shopping mall out on the west side of town, east side of town, pardon me, I didn't move it. You know, we went private with Apollo back in November. And we went private because we need to be aligned wholly with an owner who has a long-term mindset about our future. It's very difficult to go through discontinuous change on the 90-day shot clock of being a public company. Being public is great when things are great. When you have to go through discontinuous change, it's very hard. So we're delighted to actually have new owners who have put $1.5 billion of their own equity into this business to help us think longer term and transform. And I know there's been some concern in the San Antonio community. Well, what does this mean? We're owned by New York PE now. Are we going anywhere? And the answer is no. We are here in San Antonio. There are great advantages to us being here. We plan to stay here. We plan to grow here. We plan to be a bigger and better Rackspace in 2020 than we are today. But we'll have to go through some pain. You don't often get a chance to go through a linear transition, so we'll be going through some nonlinear transition, shedding some costs to reinvest in the new businesses. But San Antonio is home, and we're really pleased to be here to partner with you to help this become a tech ecosystem. And I'll leave you just with a quick parting thought. Technology is both creative and destructive, right? We have an opportunity here to be on the winning side of that. We have so many unique ingredients in the San Antonio-Austin corridor. We need to take advantage of that as a team, as a community, and end up on the winning side of this, and we can do it. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thinking about, don't even know what Blockbuster is. When Red mentioned Rolodex, I had a young man come up to me not too long ago, and he said, "Mr. Dreeben, John Doe says hello. Do you remember him?" I said, "I'm sorry, but my Rolodex is full." He said, "You what?" Anyway, let me begin by saying what the hell I'm doing at an economic summit. I've got no clue. The second part is a lot's been already said, so I'm changing half of my remarks, but it coincides with what's really going on. I have no slides. I wore a suit. I have a saying that when you have bad bullshit, you have to dress up. So here I am. It is exciting times. You can either be excited or scared. And I want to begin my remarks by a conversation that I had with Mitch McConnell, Senator McConnell. It was about 3 years ago. And his question was, "Alan, why is Texas doing so well?" And I find that disconcerting that here the head of the Senate doesn't understand this stuff. I said, well, we've got an entrepreneurial spirit. We have a great population growth, tort reform, oil, no state income tax, and right to work. And he genuinely responded, "You think right to work is an issue?" And I'm thinking, why do you think all these companies are moving to Texas? I really don't think he understood that. The other part he asked me was, "What do you think of unemployment?" And I said, well, as Taylor mentioned, I said, the number's really wrong. It's much lower in an odd way. Because the productivity of the people today, including, I don't know anybody that works 40 hours a week, including myself. The flow of information, and it's an exciting time, and the people bust their ass. I mean, I guess in union markets, you know, they can temper what they do and how much they do. I'll get to the size of our company and where we do business because that's part of it. One of the key factors in our growth was to stay in right-to-work states in the beginning, and we focused on that. Increase in automation. Thinking about what you said, I'm going to get to one subject called category management, which tells me I can tell you what sells when and where and by what time. But just in my own facility, we've gone from just working during the days to 24 hours a day, 5.5 days a week. The night shift. Texas is working the way it's supposed to, by the way. There is a shortage of employees. When we build a facility, we put it in like neighborhoods. I don't want a truck that says Jack Daniels on the side running through a neighborhood with kids. So you get in an industrial park with proper fire and police protection, et cetera, and then everybody's putting out signs, "We'll give you a bonus if you come to work." But our night shift, to compete for people, we pay $15 an hour. Plus health benefits, plus 401k, plus this, plus that. And that's the way it's supposed to work, not by a union demanding it. And like a lot of industries, we're going to talk about consolidation. It's happening at all levels of my industry, whether it be suppliers, distributors, or retailers, restaurateurs. Everybody's getting bigger. And the challenge is to be the low-cost provider of the most services. And that's just what you have to do. As we also said, good times are bad, people are drinking. I'm in a great industry. Eat your heart out. But I guess you can screw up anything. And so to really be competitive, I'm shortening my remarks here, is really you have to know all about demographics, all the multicultural changes, all the factors that contribute to what we do and how we go about our business. So I'm going to shift over real quick and give you a thumbnail sketch of what's happened in my company, our company, over the last 20 years. I'll start out, I began in 1965 or 66. My father-in-law called me in 1965 and says, I think the wine business is going to get big. He had a company called Block Distributing Company, and at the time was probably doing about $3 or $4 million in volume. Maybe I'll go 4. He said, Ernest Galloway just hired the head of training from Procter & Gamble, and did I want to move to Los Angeles or take a 90-day leave of absence from being a banker? I call that a Jewish engineer. And I'm Jewish, I can say it. And I was so ready to get out of there. They said I was too aggressive and creative. I can't understand that. Anyway, Barbara and I, my new bride, we moved to California. We ended up spending a year, and Ernest Gallo became a mentor. I met with him every 90 days and so forth. So I'm very fortunate I got appropriate training. Moved back to San Antonio to Block Distributing, which serviced San Antonio, Austin, Corpus, and the Valley. They just had the biggest year ever in wine, $250,000. The advantage I had was growing up in South Texas, where everybody else was interested in Dallas and Houston and LA and San Francisco. You could make your mistakes when they cost $100 or $1,000 as opposed to tens and hundreds of millions. Another turning point in our company was actually October of 1976. We had helped H-E-B get into the wine business. And the reason it was such an important time is a year or two later, they introduced me to category management, which I will describe in a moment. The interesting thing that has happened since then, in the spring of '96, this is 20 years ago, we were doing, I'm going to say probably $100 million in volume. And Seagram's, our largest supplier, came to us and said, there's a company in Houston with operations in Dallas. They're in financial trouble. You either buy them, sell your company, or lose your company. And I want an answer right now. And, one of the factors of success is having the courage, either guts or stupidity. I mean, there's a thin line between that. So there was a friend of ours that was in Louisiana that said, we have to get regional or we're going to die. We asked him to be our partner because I didn't want to bet the farm. And October 1 of 1996, we bought this company. There was another company based in Dallas with operations in Houston that we knew would come for sale in 10 or 20 years. 60 days after the first purchase, the father called and said, you have to buy our company because my boys are suing each other. So by June 1 of '97, we had gone from 100 million to 500 million with multiple warehouses, IT systems, and overlap of people. And I was in debt over my head. You don't sleep very well. But it all worked. This, though, was the harbinger, the beginning of consolidation in our industry. You get big or you get out. And there's no fuzzy feelings of, oh, I'll work with you or something like that. The next real phase was in 2002. A company called Diageo, which was based in England, came to us and said, for the pleasure of doing business with us, you owe me $40 million a year, and we want our own this and that and the other. I won't bore you with all the details, but we told them goodbye and made up everything in the interim. But it is the ultimate, this is when consolidation took in full bloom. And you're now dealing with international players. It is not dealing with somebody like Brown-Forman is still based in Louisville, Kentucky, but the rest of them are either in England, France, Italy, or Japan. And it's what have you done for me, not yesterday, but today. And that's just the world we live in. Texas is not going to be cordoned off from anything like this. It's going to happen. One of the, anyway, 2004, we merged the Louisiana group, and we had bought some other states. In 2006, we merged with another company based in Atlanta. So that brings us up to today. We just completed a year. I will start this remark by saying anonymity has served me better. We're privately held, but we're in the top 100 privately held companies in America. We just completed $6.7 billion with 10,000 associates. And wine is more than half of that. We went from 250,000 when I began to almost 3.5 billion in wine. And everybody says, now let's get going. I said, well, where the hell were you for the last 51 years while I was busting my ass to get here? We do business in 22 states and D.C., and as I had previously remarked, other than Michigan, Maryland, and D.C., everything else is right to work. What is interesting is our competitor, our largest competitor, we're the second largest in the country, has just gone and merged and expanded their footprint to almost a national footprint, which is then therefore it becomes incumbent upon us to do the same. And I'm sure that we'll look different within the next 24 months or so, in the near future. What I want to go back to is category management. And, it's the technology that you so aptly discussed. There's two forms of marketing as far as I'm concerned for our company, and this relates more to wine than it does spirits. Mass marketing, which is for all the major chains in this country who are going to dominate and will continue to dominate. And then relationship-based selling, which is really to restaurants or smaller independent retailers and restaurateurs. Category management is where we take the scan data when you check out from HEB, and we merge and purge it with proprietary data and zip code data and on and on and on data. Then we take that and we break the stores into socioeconomic clusters, and then measuring the zip code data is interesting because they have a baseline and it gives you by zip code the propensity of people to pay above or below a certain price by category, wine being one of those. So what we do is we bring back to the chain a suggested product mix and set for every socioeconomic slice that can glean the most profit per square inch of shelf space, and that's reviewed on a constant basis. This goes back to being the low-cost provider of the most services to our customers, and we are currently the category captain or consultant for HEB, Walmart throughout the country, Target, Publix, Whole Foods, and the validator for Kroger. Never, it's got nothing to do with being a good salesman. What you sell is dictated by the data that you produce. We can even go through that. Probably one of the most interesting parts of this was, I'm going to say we were introduced to this in the late 70s. About 1980, I got a phone call from Charles Butt's office. Get over here and get over here now. I thought, oh God, somebody screwed up and it's probably me. I said, what's the subject? I'm on my way, what's the subject? Just get over here. Now, this is a company that didn't even sell alcoholic beverages until 1976. So I go in there and I'm frightened. And he says, all right, from now on, I want wine to be a focal point in my stores. It's like manna from heaven. And so, for a little Jewish wine merchant, I said, that's great. Why? Well, from the data that was gleaned, this is just a little example. A person who buys wine buys better food products than a person who doesn't. That's like 1 + 1 is 2. But it wakes you up to the fact that there's so much information there that if you just use your God-given common sense, you can produce more and more. So we use this. It can even break it down by time of day and how to market the product, because a person who shops in the morning has more time and they're more price conscious. After 3:30, they're less price conscious. We do consumer insight. We do millennial councils. We have a division on millennials. We have a division on multicultural. And all of this helps us determine our product mix and how do we go to market. In terms of demographics, I'm really going to cut my remarks short and give us some time for questions. But Texas is one of the 5 key markets in the United States as far as our suppliers are concerned. That's Texas, Florida, New York, Illinois, and California, and it's all about volume. And The key factor because of that is more money and no more marketing positions and more marketing monies will be spent in Texas as opposed to the other states that are not in that top 5. And to the point of what Red said earlier about we're in a good spot and Texas in particular is in a good spot as our population continues to grow. I genuinely think that using the information and the data that we have today, that we can grow our business, let's say on the wine side, organically 4, 5, 6, 7% a year forever. That's a big statement. To come off that kind of a volume and just continue to grow if you just stick to your knitting and know what you're doing. Do I have threats? Probably. Online presents problems, but it's been there for a long time. And I think, Taylor, you mentioned about an experience going to the grocery store. I used to think that, well, movies were dead when television came out. Well, neither one died. But going to a grocery, shopping, learning about new things, as long as grocery stores are there, 2/3 of our wine volume at retail is done in groceries. And it's just part and parcel of the experience of getting food for your evening meal or daily. Amazon is going to be a threat. They just built a facility. I don't know if any of you all seen this. Our current facility right now is in Shirts. And a quarter of a mile away, Amazon built a facility, just a small distribution of 1.3 million square feet. It is amazing. And they're building one in San Marcos. They're building one in Austin. They are for real. There's no question about it. I'm going to end my remarks and give everybody a chance to ask questions. Thank you for including me. I hope I haven't bored you. Thank you.
Thank you all. And we had scheduled adjournment time of 9:30, so if you need to go, please go. But as that said, maybe we'll take about 10 minutes for a Q&A so we can take advantage of our panelists. Alan, I'm envisioning with Amazon drones delivering booze, and I think that could be good.
There is a federal law that says it's a 3-tier system. You can be a distributor, a supplier, a distributor, or a retailer, only one. A lot of people are attempting to go around that. But as chair of our trade association, we help fund a company called Drizzly, which is home delivery within 30 minutes of you placing your order. And but it's 3-tier compliant. It's going through the system, but we've given them the database and the wherewithal to do this throughout the country.
Interesting. So you probably have cards on your table. Send those forward or raise those up, and we'll collect them. In the meantime, are there anybody who wants to ask a oral question the old-fashioned way? Please, go ahead.
Taylor, from the significant migration to the cloud, what are the things that a lot of the businesses are more concerned about? Cybersecurity. What do we need to be aware of and get comfortable with a cloud environment versus an in-house?
That's a great question, and cybersecurity is number 2. I showed you that slide, lack of expertise. Number 2 is absolutely cybersecurity, and as we know, that threat is here, it's present. Just like people ain't going to stop drinking, there's not going to be a subsidence of this threat. So what do you need to think about? First of all, it changes very fast. It requires you to select the right tools, meaning software and hardware and vendors, and it's very difficult most times for most businesses to do that themselves. And that's why, when you're choosing a doctor, you want to find somebody who does the surgery 7 days a week, not someone who does it twice a year. And frankly, the cloud specialists, Amazon, Microsoft, Rackspace, we have done a better job protecting our clients than data breaches that have happened in a normal company's data center. In fact, if you read about the data breaches, Target, JP Morgan, et cetera, they're happening inside a corporate data center because oftentimes companies aren't specialists in this. It's hard also for normal-sized companies to aggregate enough scale to be able to afford the right tools. So bottom line is, make sure you know what questions to ask. Don't take it for granted. Second is really have a hard eye on whether or not you can keep up with it yourself while you're running your own business. And if you don't think the answer to that is yes, choose a specialist to protect you. This is one of those things like life insurance. Nobody wants to pay for it, but if you need it, you need it. And I would strongly advise all of you to make sure you're protected, because we're getting hacked right now as I speak. I guarantee it.
Other questions? So I have a question submitted about immigration policy, and it's oriented to Taylor, but if anybody else on the panel wants to chime in as well. So major tech companies are in arms regarding recent immigration policy talks. Your and Rackspace in particular's concerns regarding the balance between protecting our borders and managing immigration. And I think this is relevant for all of us. So if you want to talk about one of our previous events, we had spent some time on demographics and the age of the workforce and the ratio of workers to those they support, which is also related. So if anybody wants to chime in, Taylor, if you want to take the first whack
Sure.
at it, but talk about immigration and policy concerns.
Yeah, look, I think that we all want to keep our country safe, and I think we all see the logic behind trying to examine the current system. I think immigration reform is one of the most important things that the new administration can tackle for lots of reasons. But it can't be, it is infeasible to believe that building a wall and keeping people out is the right solution. I just don't believe that that is the case. I don't believe that the Trump decision is meant to convey that that is the philosophy either, that will keep people out forever. It was meant to say we're going to look at it hard, we're going to take time, we're going to evaluate, and we're going to make change happen. I think it wasn't implemented very well, and I think it's created needless fear and anxiety. I can't tell you how much of my week this week has been spent on this issue. You would think that it's deal with it and move on. In the technology industry, where we employ lots of people from many different cultures, this is a real issue. And because the situation is evolving quickly, and you hear administrative folks say, well, we might add more countries. We're not sure yet how this applies to everybody with a green card. We have really created a seizure in a lot of commerce that I think was unnecessary. So will we get through it? Absolutely. Do we need to have a close look at immigration and safety? Yes. Keeping talented people out of this country is the wrong answer, in my opinion.
Keith or Alan, you want to comment?
Well, look, this is a great country. No matter what occurs, this country is going to keep going. I think that I look over at Germany and places where they have all these issues because they've taken in too many and too fast. And so if we go into a phase where we stop for a while, the sense of security or insecurity is very real. Yeah. And I personally let it happen, and if it goes too far, you can bring it back. But I'm comfortable where we're going.
I'll just add that the demographics suggest tighter and tighter labor markets in the U.S. So I think we need to be cognizant of that. I think we need to, if you're looking at the border with Mexico, there's a mix of people crossing. A lot of them are looking for jobs in construction and ag, and some of them are carrying drugs across the border. So if you improve and enhance the guest worker program, a lot of the workers will come across legally. Yeah. And we'll have documentation. And then you can spend more of your border time instead of catching them and sending them back. You can actually be focused on the criminal element. So I think, we ought to focus on the guest worker program. That might be efficient.
Good, thank you. Next question is something that has also come up when we've been around the state, regulation. And, I heard it described one of our previous conversations as coming out of the least friendly business environment they had seen in their career. So could you talk about the regulatory environment, and Keith, maybe you'll be willing to lead off and opine a bit on financial and bank lending, and maybe what you think the outlook there is, and if anybody else wants to chime in on the regulatory outlook as well.
Yeah, I think anytime you have a credit crisis, the pendulum goes from very loose to tight, and regulators tend to overdo it. I think there's a consensus that Dodd-Frank was an overdue. And we hear a lot from our particular community bankers about the very high cost of increased regulation on community banks that actually stepped in during the crisis and provided a lot of credit. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. I know the new administration has pointed this out, and we don't know how all that will work out. But I think we along with our you know, we do a lot of focus groups with small businesses and banks, and we've heard over and over again about the kind of over-regulation that's occurred that was supposed to stop too big to fail, but is really creating a very tough environment for small community banks to survive. So I think there needs to be a lot of work done on the regulatory side of the finance industry.
Alan, you want to comment?
No, I
anything
just-
else? Agree.
That's it.
Yeah.
I just have one comment.
Please.
Less, please.
Less is better. Yeah.
Less is better.
Other comments in the crowd? Any last questions? Please, sir.
I think the opportunity for the San Antonio-Austin corridor is tremendous.
Phenomenal.
Phenomenal. You know, and part of it, we got a transportation problem, which I think there are things we're working on. But seems to me, and I really, it's just a question to the dean, is what collaboration is University of Texas in Austin, San Antonio, and then the University in San Marcos? Are they collaborating to do things together? Because you know, the echelon to get into the UT Business School, for example, I couldn't get in. Most of the people, a lot of people in this room couldn't get in.
Neither could Red.
You know, so there's a lot of, you know, there's workers of all levels, and so I wonder what if you guys are collaborating at all to try to add workforce to the whole region.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think it's getting better, but has a long way to go, honestly. So I think we've been so worried about our own houses in some sense, we haven't done the things we could do to reach across. And you know, we sit in a fortunate spot in Austin of huge excess demand for what we can supply, and we just can't serve. You know, I get nervous when I hear all these great things about the state, and you think our admissions policies are tough now. I think I've heard we're adding 1,200 people to Texas. Is it a day? I mean, it's going to get worse. So your point, I think, is spot on. We have to be thinking more about the system. And you know, Rad left, but I think part of what the regents are going to be working on with us is to think more system-wide. I think the chancellor's helped that, and thinking about this as a system of universities. California is a place that we can look to, and you know, California is the gold standard as far as state university systems of having multiple very, very top universities. And there's no reason, I think, as demographics and wealth and the state continue to move up, we can't compete. But we have to get away from thinking of this as you know, stand alone in some sense and start to think about ways we can cooperate. So I think you're right. But candidly, we're just starting. Anything else? Please, last question. How about that?
You said, economists, you said quite a bit of the state is exporting. I'm curious what your thoughts are on either this proposed border adjustment tax and/or this potential 20% tariff or whatever. Like, imports will be dramatically affected by, I mean, exports are dramatically affected by imports as well. I mean, something like 25 to 50% of all imports go into exporting.
Yeah, so in fact, Yahoo had a story, something like if you took away all the exports of cars from Mexico, it would do away with our trade deficit with Mexico. But first you have to do away with, most of those cars are first imported from the U.S. and then exported to the U.S. I mean, it's a production sharing process where wiring and harnesses and other things, cars go south and then back north. So trade is very much, we think of trade as we buy their goods and they buy our goods. But if you look at the export and import list, a lot of the same commodities are on there. So trade is very important to Texas. It's very important to the U.S. Most of the wars in this country were created by import tariffs, not export. We take imports for granted, but they're very important. Think of the Boston Tea Party with the tariffs on teas. Well, the Texas-Mexico War also had to do with imports. Santa Ana putting imports on tariffs coming from the northeast into this region of Mexico. But we take imports for granted. But in the production process, there's a lot of imports and export going around. So it's going to be, and any country that you're going to slap taxes or tariffs on their shipments, they're going to do the same to you. They're going to retaliate. So it's bad. That's bad.
We
We'll say that.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to say, we talked about holding an event where we would debate trade, and I said, you won't find an economist who says free trade is bad.
It's one of the few things most economists agree on. And so that's why nobody else does. But it's just like any kind of competition. And I teach at the EMBA. There were some of my students here. And so, I mean, if we don't want imports from Mexico, why do we import stuff from New York City? I mean, why don't we slap imports from any place outside of Texas?
That's a good idea.
And if you use that argument, why not? We can produce everything we want here in San Antonio, blah, blah, blah. So competition is a great thing for consumers, and it's a great thing for producers until somebody moves in right next door. And trade is just another form of competition that makes us work harder and smarter and produce the things that we have a comparative advantage in. So it's very tough. And you did a very eloquent job talking about productivity gains. And productivity gains are never easy. We didn't move the standard of living increases we've got through the first half of the 1900s through the mechanization of farms. It was not easy on people. But in the long run, it increases our standard of living because we have machines doing all this tedious farm work, very hard work. And it's constantly changing. And Schumpeter was brought up. Schumpeter, it talks about creative destruction. And it's always killing jobs. Productivity gains comes with job loss. And it changes how we do things. And at the end of the day, machines and computers and processes do more of the work. We get more stuff for every hour we work. And that's what productivity is. And trade is a part of that. Trade is, well, I don't know. I don't want to ramble on. But anyway, it's bad.
All right. Okay. So thank you. Thanks to our panelists. And those of you who could stay later, thank you. Sorry we went a little bit over, but I think, in my opinion, the content was worth it after I got done. So how about a round of applause for our panelists? Thanks again to our friends at the Fed, and we'll hope to see you again next year.